Back in the 1990s, video game mascots were kind of the face of gaming. They were the face of every company and every franchise, and characters like Mario and Sonic and Crash Bandicoot have all since become cultural icons. But over the years, mascots have kind of disappeared from the main stage, and there has certainly been a rise at one point, but also a fall, and also some that have still been left in the current gaming space. Companies like Nintendo and Sega needed recognisable faces for their games to bring people back to their consoles. Mario became synonymous with Nintendo, Sega had Sonic, and Sony had Crash Bandicoot. But this is the thing, you can't just look at them as protagonists because they were also marketing tools. Each company needed a recognisable face to bring people back to their consoles and create that brand loyalty. And earlier game systems just didn't have the graphical power to create these massively in-depth characters, and so what little polygons these developers had, they had to use them to create recognisable characters. Many early games relied on character-driven narratives to engage their audience, and having these memorable characters only helped players connect with these characters and games even more. And not many other mascots have been able to really break through that barrier of just gaming. Characters like Mario and Sonic and Donkey Kong have all been able to push outside of games with TV shows and movies and merchandise, and it just made their appeal more than what the game was. It became a cultural phenomenon. By the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of game companies were trying to replicate what Mario and Sonic and Crash Bandicoot had done, emulating the similar styles of games, similar mascots, but by this point, most of the developers who tried to replicate these games, well, let's just put it this way, it didn't go too well. Otherwise you would have heard of them by now. But it's not also just like fatigue with mascots, there was also just a change in general with the gaming space. Many people preferred more realistic and narrative driven games like Call of Duty and also like Final Fantasy and Halo. Different experiences that we were yet to experience. And they often didn't rely on one singular mascot. I think Halo is the only caveat to this because he has been in every single game since the very beginning. Game developers didn't need to rely on simple graphics and cartoon aesthetics to create an engaging and immersive experience anymore. And where games changed, there was no need for just one singular mascot, especially if games were changing from entry to entry, and so it reduced the need for a single mascot because they had such a diverse range of characters. Now, companies like Nintendo are still using mascots, and they have continued to evolve their brand past just Mario. You've now got Luigi. No, but being serious, they've now expanded their roster to a multitude of different characters, keeping in that mascot space, but also allowing them to expand outside of just Mario. And there are very few mascot franchises that are still going to this day. Now I know this may be cheating, but we've still got Spyro that's still going, albeit it was just a remastered trilogy that came out in 2018 and was not a fresh entry, but it proved that there was still a desire for a brand new Spyro game. Now it's a similar story, but Naughty Dog's original 3 Crash Bandicoot games were very well received, and it got passed off to different studios, and then the interest dwindled down. But in 2017 we saw a trilogy remaster of the first 3 games, plus the Nitro Kart games, but then in 2020 we also saw a brand new entry, that being Crash 4, just showing that there is still an interest in mascots. And then you have Ratchet and Clank, which was the next game series after Insomniac created Spyro. Their most recent entry was in 2021 with Rift Apart, which was a launch game for the PlayStation 5. And many fans, both new and old, really loved a return to a simpler time when it came to gaming. It didn't have to be realistic graphics and you can see the sweat pores coming out of Ratchet's face. It was just good, simple fun, and I think that that's really something that a lot of people are missing. Then you have franchises that just kind of didn't meet the mark anymore. Franchises like Jak and Daxter, that although were loved for their amazing open worlds and engaging characters, ultimately the studio just had a shift of focus and moved to franchises like Uncharted and The Last of Us. Because by the second entry in the series, the games had a tonal shift. They were more catered towards an adult audience in comparison to the collectathon that was the first Jak and Daxter. And even though there isn't any news for a new Jak and Daxter, the fan base is still loyal to the series and remembers it very fondly, but unfortunately, I don't really see a market for it anymore. And then you have stuff like Conker's Bad Fur Day, which, although sounds like the most ideal meta game in the world, it unfortunately just didn't continue. Despite its cult status, Conker just didn't get the audience that it needed. Because it was a mature game when it came out, the audience was very limited, and so people didn't really catch up to Conker until it was too late. And I think I've seen so many like Watch Mojo lists about this next one, but Earthworm Jim. It was known for its surreal and innovative humour, but unfortunately with each subsequent release, it just fell off so quickly and just couldn't capture the magic of what the first entry had. Despite the decline of Mascots, platformers still have a significant place in gaming today. As I mentioned previously, you have Crash Bandicoot, and you have Spyro, and you have Ratchet Clank, all franchises that started in the early 90s/2000s and are still releasing entries to this day. And it's not even necessarily a nostalgia factor, right? Because we can all look at things through rose-tinted glasses and be like, yes, I remember I used to play that game when I was like 4. But with each subsequent release, they're seeing new people hopping onto the series and realising how amazing that they are and deciding to go back and play the very first one and make their way all the way through. You also have game series like Hollow Knight, which was like an indie success, if you will. The hand-drawn art style and the challenging appeal of what Hollow Knight offered made people realise that it was actually a standout title and not just one to throw away. And then you have a game like Cuphead with its unique 1930s aesthetic. Again, another platformer with a challenging appeal to it. Cuphead earned its critical acclaim and then also released merchandise and an animated TV series, and remains a popular and influential title that many people want a sequel to. But then you also have timeless classics like Mario. Mario, although you remember him as that side-scroller, or depending on where you hopped onto the franchise, maybe like a semi-open world in space, Nintendo's ability to retain that classic gameplay but then also innovate it into different types of genres. It's just something really remarkable that Nintendo is able to vary their franchise so much and keep that mascot alive. The rise and fall of Mascots really just kind of reflects the change in taste when it comes to games. And although many mascots have faded into obscurity, there have still been those couple, that little handful, that have managed to leverage their way into gaming today. And platformers as a genre has evolved over time. It's not necessarily just a collectathon anymore, it's also combat, and there's so many other factors that can keep a platformer different but also the same, with that classic nostalgic feeling. But unfortunately, with that shift in trend that we've seen, well, for the past 20 or so years, that also means that a place for mascots also changes as well. And although we have people like Master Chief who have still stuck with their franchises, and Mario and Sonic since the beginning of their game inception, unfortunately the fate has just not been the same for everyone. And with the change in technology, there is always that space for brand new mascots like Astrobot. No, I'm being serious, Astrobot is a great platformer.